Hi, I'm here at the New England Air Museum where they hold the annual Quilt Show, and I am here with...
Jackie Kunkel. I am the coordinator of the Flights and Fantasies Quilt Show. It's our third year here. I started the Quilt Show. I can tell you a little bit about it. I started it about 3 years ago because my husband actually has his private pilot's license. And I quilt as a hobby and as a business. My hobby kind of grew into business. But we were sitting around one day and I said, wouldn't it be nice to kind of combine the two things together, both of our loves that we like to do. And coincidentally, the president of the museum here, Scott Ashton, he was my husband's flight instructor when my husband was learning how to fly. So I said, do you think Scott would want a quilt show there? And he says, why don't you ask him? So I did, and he wasn't sure. He's like, why? And I said, why not? And so the director of marketing at the time was all for it, and we started planning, and we had the quilt show that first year, and it was pretty successful in our eyes at the time, and we didn't know that it would probably roll into another year, and until we got the final numbers of how many people came to the museum that week, because September was kind of their slow month, and that's why we chose September. And when they got their final numbers, they said, can we do this again? It was really nice, and it was really well received. And as you've seen probably walking through the show, we have tons and tons of beautiful quilts here on exhibit, and we get quilts actually now. We get them sent in to us from all different states. The quilt show is starting to gain momentum, and it's starting to become recognized by a lot of people. We do a lot of, like you, we're on social media, and we do a lot of that. But we wanted, my whole idea was to benefit the museum in a different way. Bring new people into the museum that have never been here before. And we get lots of people coming through the door where it's their first time ever into this museum, and it's really literally in their backyards. So it's something, this museum has some real history here as far as aviation is concerned, and other history in here. And it's a great place for families to come and learn a lot about aviation and the history of it. But when you go to a quilt show, quilting is a kind of a female-dominated, and we talked about this, it's kind of a female-dominated hobby, but more and more men are now quilting, and you'll see when you walk through the show, we have quite a few entrants that were made by men. But the nice thing about having it here is that it's really a family affair. People who enjoy looking at the quilts, look at the quilts. People who enjoy looking at the planes, look at the planes. So you can come spend the whole day here and kind of get a little bit best of both worlds.
Now, is there a stylistic difference between the quilts made by men and the quilts made by women?
That's a good question. I think it's really more of a matter of taste between, from the person's point of view. What may be attractive to me or inspirational to me may not be to you. So you tend to make, as a quilter, I tend to make what I like. Although I do have a very deep appreciation for other styles of quilting, and I love it, doesn't mean that I'll make it. So I hope that answers your question.
Sure. Yeah.
So.
Of course, and I think you mentioned you teach quilt classes?
Yes, I do. I travel and lecture throughout the country, actually, and I have a local studio I have up in Winstead, which I teach out of. Okay. So yeah, I do a lot of teaching, and I really enjoy teaching and getting new people interested in quilting, and having a quilt show here, and people come through the doors here and see quilts. And people who've never quilted before get interested in it just by seeing the quilts hanging, which is really kind of cool.
Now, the people who come to your quilt classes, and I think is it a beginner's class you teach?
I teach all levels. So as you can see, this is my booth, and as you can see, the quilt directly behind us is quite a complex quilt. Although that can be taught to, I would say, advanced beginners to, expert quilters. So I'm not a true beginner, but I would say an advanced beginner. So even those who are just starting out can really kind of get into something like that and get a more complex design made.
What I've noticed from the quilt show so far is that making the quilt, it takes a lot of patience.
It does.
Does that sort of frustrate beginners who want to get it done as soon as possible? I mean, have you ever experienced those kind of people?
Well, I think the frustration comes from not so much wanting to get it done, but wanting to learn the technique. And I think that's more where the frustration comes in. Quilting is a time-consuming process. And if you go into quilting thinking that it's going to be done lickety-split, it's probably not the hobby for you, because it does take time. So it takes a little while to quilt, and from going from like a quilt top and then making it into the quilt, quilting it and binding it and getting it all done. It's a time-consuming process. So, I mean, and you'll see, and you haven't been over there yet, but you will, over to the B29 hanger where we actually have World War I quilts hanging. Those quilts were made back in, I think there's one or two quilts that were made in 1910, but the majority of them are 1918, 1917 era. So those people who made those quilts, they even had less available to them at that time to make those quilts. A lot of them are hand sewn. Some use treadle machines, sewing machines. So talk about time consuming. Whereas now we have, we have electronic machines, sewing machines, so we can get things done a lot quicker. Although there are a lot of people that do still hand sew their quilts together. So you have people who still enjoy the handwork, and people that want to produce faster use a sewing machine. So.
How was it for you when you first started to learn quilts?
It's funny. Well, my history goes back a little bit. Back in, I had home economics when I was in 6th grade. They don't have home economics anymore. They have family and consumer sciences, I think. And my children were in high school. They had, I think, 3 weeks of it. I had a whole year. Half the year was devoted to sewing. Half the year was devoted to cooking. And so I first learned to sew back then, and I learned how to make garments. And I actually did make a patchwork pillow back in 6th grade. So if you go back far enough, I actually still have that first patchwork pillow. And it's in my closet at home. But then when I was pregnant with my first child, I started sewing garments again. I started making baby clothes. And then my husband said, you should get a hobby if you're going to stay home with the kids, because that's what we had agreed, that I would stay home with the kids. And I said, hobby? I couldn't get over that. But anyway, I said, all right. So I took a quilting class. And the very first formal quilting class I took, I didn't like it so much. And I think it was the way it was presented by the instructor. I just didn't like it. I never finished that project. But I said, okay, I'm game. I'll go for another quilting class. But I took it from a different instructor. And that just lit the fire underneath my feet, and I just kept going. And eventually, that was back in 1993, and then eventually in 2000 it turned into a business, because I just stayed home and I just said, I'm going to make it a business so I can still stay home with the kids but do what I want. I give my quilts to people whom I know will appreciate them. I do things for charity, as a lot of quilters do. Quilters are a very giving group of people as a whole. There's a lot of charitable organizations that quilters make quilts for. We do, for instance, we have Quilts of Valor, which is huge. Soldiers that come back from war, they all get handed a quilt made specifically for them. And there are quilts made, there's the Linus Project, there's also quilts that are made for NICU babies, little preemie babies. They're little teeny tiny quilts that get brought to the hospitals. There's lots of ways that quilters give. There's a project a friend of mine who's involved with a homeless shelter, and I've donated quilts to them. So those people that go into the homeless shelter can have a quilt to keep them warm. So even though quilting, as you can see in the show, it's really an art form, it's a really great way to give back too. And quilters really do a lot of that.
I saw a quilt. Someone told me that this quilt is worth like $2,000. I mean, there are some very valuable quilts here.
Oh, yeah. Yes, there are some very valuable quilts here. And if you look, we do, the quilt show that we do here is a non-judged show. So we do not jury the quilts in. We do give out ribbons, but they're viewer's choice. So it's what you like or what I like or what he likes. You vote on the one that you like the most. Versus a judged quilt show where the quilts come in and they're juried. If they don't meet certain criteria, they can't be in the show. And then once they get juried into the show, then they get judged, and they will win ribbons by the judges. Because they have to be certain way, the quilting, the colors, the piecing of the quilt. So they have to be, perfect quilts. But we have some real show quality quilts here. So it's nice for those people who are hesitant about entering a judge show to have a show like this where they can enter a quilt and not worry about being judged on it. Because we have a lot of people that do worry about that. But this is a great way to display their quilts and, get feedback on it just from people who enjoy them.
Absolutely. Now, the name Flights and Fantasies,
Yes.
it's a lovely name for a quilt show. How did you come up with it?
Well, the first year it was called Things with Wings. And last year we were just kind of throwing around names because we wanted to change the name of the show. And I don't remember how exactly. I think we took a vote on it. I think we just kind of started throwing names out there. And we all just kind of seemed to like that Flights and Fantasies name. It kind of fit in with the museum, and the fantasy of being able to make a quilt, and and making it anything you want. So it was just kind of like what sounded good and what kind of fit in with what we wanted, and that's going to be the name of the show. Progressing on.
This is Jackie. She is the coordinator of the annual Quilt Show. It happens every September.
Yes.
Every September right here at the New England Air Museum. And thank you, Jackie, so much for talking with me.
Thank you.